We will call our meeting to order. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We will start with our roll call. Madam Secretary Pam Knowles.
Yes, Madam President, all members are present.
Thank you. Next, we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd all please stand and join Pam and her family as they lead us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So tonight we have a very special recognition. The district update, which is our spotlight on excellence, is the retirement of our board member and secretary, Pam Knowles. And we're going to turn it over to Dr. Beresford to start the presentation.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm not real happy about this, Pam. But you certainly have earned, some time off after all the work. And if it's okay with you, I'm going to do my bell ringer for the superintendent's report right now.
Okay, I'm getting out my tea.
Well, Pam, I want you to know that we are, first off, very grateful for your 44 years of service to Carmel Clay Schools. The children and families of our community have benefited greatly because of your work on their behalf. Your dedication and enthusiasm as an elementary school teacher made a positive impact on the lives of countless students. Now, I don't know how we would add that up over those years of all the different lives of students, but I do know one thing for sure, it's a really big number. And your work on the board has just been outstanding, and you're leaving behind a great legacy of service to our community and ensuring that our schools remain wonderful places for students to learn and grow. And we'll miss your questions, that kept us on our toes. But your insights as a classroom teacher have been so valuable in our discussions over the years that I've been here, and I know beyond that too. Your infectious smile and your laughter. One of the things that you really brought to the board was strong opinions and passion about what you believed in, but also you worked with other people that you would completely disagree with, but you always left the meeting. We're in this together. We're all together. We're one board. And you set a great example on how to disagree with other people respectfully and just doing it the right way. So we're going to miss you, and I wish you the very best as you move on to your new adventures, whether that's your work as an author, a traveler, but probably most importantly as a grandma to those beautiful grandchildren. And so with that, I offer you nothing but the best, and thank you for your service to Carmel Clay Schools. Now we have a few gifts, and the first one I'm going to give to President Spannenberg to give you.
Thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Pamela Knowles, in appreciation for your direction and guidance, Carmel Clay School Board, July 2010 to September 2021. Can you believe it? 11 years? Jeez.
And just open that lid.
Okay, hinge open.
Of course it is. You're trying to, nope.
That's the front.
Ooh, that's neat. A compass, so I can find my direction to Florida. No.
Symbolic of all the direction that you've given us over the years. And,
Oh, that's nice. Thank you. Wow.
We couldn't send you away without some flowers.
Oh, roses. Oh, beautiful. Oh, thank you.
And then from me.
Uh-oh. My nameplate. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Oh.
And Pam, time, I think each of us have prepared just a little something, and so I wanted to
Can I
just...
say my something
Oh,
first?
you certainly say your something first.
Okay. All right. Members of the school board, administrators, family, and community members, I would like to recognize my family who came to celebrate and support with me tonight. They are my inspiration and my life. I want them to know how very proud I am to be a wife, mother, mother-in-law, Nana to an amazing family. After 11 years on the board, I have decided to retire. It is time. But it was important to me to ensure several things were seen to completion before I left. Closing Orchard Park and Carmel Elementary, opening of 2 new schools this year, redistricting, the safety referendum, resolving the transportation issues, beginning of a multi-year facilities project, continuing to update district policies, and to ensure the stability of the corporation by negotiating a new contract with Dr. Beresford. I know our district will be in good hands through his continued leadership. It seems strange to be retiring from this district for a second time, once from teaching and now from the school board. I have enjoyed the many positions I have held over the years and the people I have met along the way, many of whom are close friends to this day. I have seen numerous changes in our schools and in the city of Carmel. As a matter of fact, Carmel elected its first mayor the year my family moved here in 1974, when my first daughter was born. And Old North was being used by the district at that time. I'm very proud of the work I have done and the things I have accomplished over these 11 years. The one I am most proud of is being on the policy committee for 10 of those years. Layla and I were elected to the board the same year, and we're both interested in taking on the job of writing policy. We worked tirelessly to update, consolidate, and rewrite policies already in place, and adding new ones as new laws were adopted each year. I am definitely going to miss her, as we have become good friends over these many years. I've learned that each board member brings a unique perspective to their position. It is always important to respect each other, to understand that it's okay to view issues differently, to discuss with an open mind, to trust each other, to maintain confidences, to realize that we are the governance part of the school system and not management. That is Dr. Beresford's role. To ask a lot of questions and always do what is best for the students. I will miss not coming to board meetings twice a month and the other responsibilities that go with the position, but I'm looking forward to starting a new chapter in my life. I plan to spend time with family, to travel, to write, and to volunteer. I don't know where this road will lead, but I'm eager to get started. I do know I'm going to Disney World.
Pam, what an incredible career you've had. From the classroom to the boardroom, you have positively impacted the lives of thousands of children across Indiana. I remember meeting you for the first time at Panera Bread, February 2010, when we were both school board candidates. I am blessed to have been able to join you for this leg of your journey. You were chatty, friendly, and full of smiles, and today you are still that warm, friendly person. You have been an asset to the board, providing leadership, perspective, and robust discussion. Along with our students and staff, each of us on the board have benefited from your experience, your expertise, and your perspective. As you reflect on your journey with Carmel, I hope your mind is flooded with fond memories of priceless gifts. Your positive impact is not measured by test scores or years worked, but by the gifts that you've shared with us and the memories you've created. Like when Ken serenaded my mom at dinner that one evening. Your journey is measured by the friendships, smiles, graduation and wedding invitations you've received, hugs, and unparalleled support. Your journey is the priceless gift to the thousands of lives you've touched while in Carmel, including mine. I wish you the very best as you embark on your next journey, your official retirement, and time with your family. And please remember, don't be a stranger. You are always welcome and will forever be part of our Carmel Clay family. So.
So I just wanted to say that I'm so thankful coming in rather newer that I loved it when you would say things like, you know, great job, you're doing great. And I also loved it when you're like, don't do it that way. Your honesty and your thoroughness is unparalleled. I love it when you review a document and not only do you give your opinions and thoughts on it, but you're like, this needs a comma, this isn't a complete sentence. Please make sure you check that. You are nothing if not thorough. I'm so very thankful that I've had this time to serve with you, and I wish you the very best.
Thank you.
Pam, I will agree with my fellow board members and Dr. Beresford, and it is my honor and privilege to work with you on this board to make Carmel Clay Schools a better place for our students, families, and staff. Thank you for all that you have done for our district over your career and serving on this board. Carmel Clay Schools are better because of your commitment to our district. Enjoy the next chapter of your life. Thank you.
Pam, I've only been on the board for a few months, but it's been enough time to really experience what you bring to the board. I definitely appreciate your directness. I appreciate your strength and your knowledge and experience as a teacher and educator and standing up for teachers. I appreciate the fact that you have run for school board, what, three times. So that's really amazing because I've done it once and it was exhausting. So your spirit will be missed, and I pray that you'll continue to move forward in life with that same fervor and strength and admire everything you've done. Thank you.
At this time, yes, at this time, we're going to recess and take pictures, and then we will proceed with our meeting. Yes, that was great. Well, moving right along, the next item on our agenda is consent. On consent this evening, we've got the personnel report, claims, and payroll. In addition to that, we have the building safety plans, the corporation safety plans, and the Carmel Clay school handbooks for the elementary and middle schools. May I get a motion on the table to approve consent?
So moved.
Thank you, Katie. A second?
Second.
Thank you, Louise. Discussion. All those in favor of supporting consent signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries 4-0. Next on the agenda, we have our first action.
Excuse me,
Yes.
before we jump off of there,
So sorry.
on the consent agenda was the retirement of Ron Barron. And so Mr. McMichael would like to say a few words on Ron's behalf as an outstanding employee for so many years.
Yes, Ron worked for Carmel Schools just over 23 years. He and I have worked together about 30 years because we worked together in South Bend prior to either one of us coming here. And so I've known Ron for a long time, since 1990. I want to note that I've had worked with two directors of facilities. Both of them's name were Ron. So I'm going to have a little trouble changing names, but I'm working on it. I want to point out that in the time that Ron's been here, he's overseen the construction of all of our schools, either new construction or major renovations, with the exception of 4 elementary schools. And those 4 elementary schools, he did oversee what we call the mid-cycle renovations. But other than that, I'm pretty sure he's got names on more plaques in this school district than most anybody else. And so you know what our facilities and grounds look like. And I know, in addition to what they look like, they also generally operate properly. And so the things that is not as noticeable is just as important and significant as what people can see. And Ron has definitely had a major part in that. But his strongest characteristic actually is that he understands why we build these buildings. And so he knows that, they're for kids and our staff. And he never really lost sight of that. And I think that's extremely commendable. Thank you.
And I'd just like to add that I first met Ron, when I started here, and 3 years ago. And the first thing I noticed is that if he uses 200 words in a day, that's like a chatty day for him. And he's a man of very few words, but a man of great action. And when you hang around people enough that there's people that talk about getting things done, there's people that actually get them done. Ron's one of those guys that gets it done. The other thing I would just point out that when we had the explosion at Carmel High School, and what a catastrophe that was, and that night Ron started working on that problem, and 12 days after that explosion, we started the second semester on time, and I don't see that happening with anybody but Ron Barron at the helm of putting that together with all the systems that had to be changed and all it was just an enormous amount of work that had to happen in order to make that happen. And since then, it's just been just a joy to work with him. So I'm going to miss Ron, but he has earned some time off for sure. And we're very grateful for the work of Ron Barron in this district and this community for all the years he put in. I did say to him that I'd really miss him at 5 a.m. on cold winter mornings when there's lots of ice and snow. And he said that there's a lot of things that he's going to miss about Carmel Clay Schools, but that's not one of them. So, so Ron gets to sleep in, good for him. So, yeah, great man. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Roger and Dr. B, for sharing such kind words about Ron and reflecting on all the positive contributions he's made to our Carmel Clay School family. As I move along, we've got next on the agenda the bus driver agreement. First action item, we turn to Mr. McMichael.
Thank you, pleased to bring this to you, and I'm also pleased of the very positive relationship we have with our bus drivers and with the representatives, those that represent our drivers. This is a recommendation for a 2-year agreement. The highlights is in the first year, it provides for a 7% increase. As you know, that's more than what we gave others earlier in the year. Or with the bus drivers, they're paid a daily rate, and so when we changed bell times, it also extended their day. And so we wanted to recognize that as a part of the compensation. And of course, we know how short we are bus drivers, so it's important that we maintain a competitive salary schedule so that we can attract others. In the second year of this agreement, it's a 2% increase, which is consistent with other members of our support staff. And so with that, I would highly recommend your approval of the agreement.
Thank you very much, Roger. Make it a motion on the table to approve the 2021 through 2023 2-year bus driver agreement.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Kirschner. A second? Second. Thank you, Mrs. Browning. I was going to say Miss Katie. Discussion. Okay. Mike?
I'd just like to thank Roger and the Bus Drivers Association. And anytime I get a chance to talk about bus drivers, I think it's important to say that they greet our kids every morning and they take our kids home every day, and they can make or break a kid's day. So that simple hello and that simple hi, Charlie goes a long way, and we've got great bus drivers, and I thank them for their service.
Thank you.
Katie?
Can you explain a little bit? I know that the idea of health insurance and everything's come up before, but can you explain about the opportunity if they do want to work in the daytime also, what we have?
Yes, our bus drivers have not had access to our insurance for about 15 years. We made that decision a number of years ago, in part to because when we did have insurance, only about a third took the insurance, and about 2/3 didn't. So a lot of things have changed in terms of access. It's much easier to access insurance now than it was 15 years ago. However, our drivers do have access to insurance, but they have to work a minimum number of hours to do that. And so we have at least 30 drivers, if not more, that in addition to driving a bus, they do other things. So that, for example, some of them work as in our cafeteria over the lunch hour, and then if they work the minimum hours, then they do have access to the Affordable Care Act insurance, and which serves many of them very well. And so it's not that they don't have access. They don't have access if they just run a morning and afternoon route, but otherwise they do.
Thank you.
Yes. Louise?
Roger, have we thought about polling the bus drivers or asking their organization to poll them to see if there's a greater interest in us providing a wider amount of benefits for the drivers?
We've not done a poll, at least not a specific poll as you suggest, but we do know that everybody needs insurance, and so when the drivers come and they know they don't have access through us with insurance unless they work some additional hours, we feel that most of them have insurance other places, and typically what happens is we make our decision on insurance if we have more than one choice from whatever's the best financially for the employee. And so the answer is no, we've not taken a formal request. Even if we did, we have a self-funded plan, and so we know based on industry standards that part-time employees, and we don't consider bus drivers, by the way, part-time in terms of what they do, but in terms of a traditional 12-month, 8 hours a day, they're part-time in that sense. And so it's just a fact that part-time employees generally have a higher risk of insurance. And so it's not the premium that is the cost. The automobile cost is the claims. And the premium, we have to have enough premium to pay the claims. And so if we have, about half of our employees, not just bus drivers, about half of them do not qualify for our insurance. And it's really based on the number of hours that the position provides. And so the picture's bigger than just bus drivers, as we consider really part-time employees, if you will.
Thanks.
Thank you, Roger. Are there any other questions? Thank you. Seeing that there are no other questions, it is time to take a vote and approve the bus driver agreement. All those in favor of supporting the 2-year 2021 through 2023 bus driver agreement, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries 4-0. Thank you very much. And Colleen, I just want to make sure, do we have on the record when Pam left? Okay, thank you.
The agenda.
Next on the agenda, we have discussion. We've got 2 items to be discussed. The first is the second reading of Bylaw 0167.3, public comment at board meetings. To that, we will turn to Dr. Dudley and Katie. Dr. Dudley.
Thank you. So this evening, we have the second reading of Bylaw 0167.3, public comment at board meetings, and the new suggested title would be public attendance and public comment at board meetings as a change. And I know board members had several different suggestions of changes as this went out, and so it's come back for a second discussion.
Thank you. Are there questions? Katie, do you have any comments or further comments that you want to make? Or
I just wanted to say, you know, we've really looked hard at this and trying to make it, looking at what other districts are doing, what we're allowed to do, what we're not allowed to do, in order to make it so that we can have public comment, and that the most people can participate in like the best possible way, so.
And just to add as well, our attorneys have also reviewed this policy as well to make sure that it's in alignment with all state statutes.
okay. So I know my kid sent some ideas, and I had a couple questions. One of the questions I had, the word cussing that's in here, I'm not particularly fond of that word. If could we use expletives or another word? How would you like us to proceed? Since this is the second reading, we're not taking action on it tonight, but I know there are some suggestions from Mr. Kirschner. How shall we incorporate just some of those ideas? What would you prefer?
Well, I think what we can do is, because we do have the suggestions that different board members made, we can go back and incorporate those in before
Okay.
we bring it. But this will come back to the board for vote on the regular board session.
September 27th.
Yes,
I believe.
September 27th.
Okay.
So we can take those, I did not add any of those
okay.
suggestions in this time because they were just suggestions.
Right.
But the policy committee will reconvene and we can look at those and add in those suggestions.
Okay, will the policy committee be meeting before the September 27th meeting?
Yes. Typically, when suggestions come up, the policy committee tries to meet in between those meetings when we do need to go back and incorporate those suggestions into any of the policies. So
Fantastic,
we'll
okay.
be setting up a meeting with Mrs. Browning and Mr. Kirschner.
Sounds great. Are there other questions or concerns? Yes. Louise?
Yes. So with regard to people speaking on the same topic more than once, how do we accommodate those who have opposing views on the same topic if there's only allowed one instance for people to speak on that topic?
So that is, the same person cannot speak on the same topic at night, at the same night. That's what that is.
Okay, so we might amend that language. I'll note it. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, then we will just move right along. And the next is the first reading of policy 9600, civility and decorum.
Yes, thank you. So this policy is a new policy that the policy committee is proposing to the board. And the purpose of this policy is really to look at how it looks at our employees, our students, our parents, our guardians, as well as members of the community, and how they're expected to treat each other with civility and decorum. And so what this policy does is lines out those expectations by the board on that common courtesy in all of our actions, so in the school setting, as well as any operations within the school, and also school-sponsored events.
Thank you, Dr. Dudley. Are there questions, comments? Katie, do you have any comments that you'd like to make with regards to this? I know you, maybe perhaps some of the background and process, since you did a lot of research on this?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, as we were looking at not only our board meetings, but just kind of at the district as a whole, you know, how do we have that respectful dialogue among employees, students, parents, guardians, member of the public? We want that. We want to encourage that. But however do we, you know, if that interferes or disrupts an operation, a program, an activity, children, like how do we manage that? And we realized that we didn't really have anything in writing as far as policy-wise, as far as that goes. So we wanted to make sure that there was something there that we could present, not only for us as board members, but also for our staff members, so that they can relate back to, and that our community can know, like what are our, you know, what are our expectations? So we just wanted to make sure that that was very available.
Was this also reviewed by general counsel?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Are there other questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Kirschner?
Well, first, I'd like to thank the policy committee for all their work on these two new policies, revised policies. And I guess another shout out to Pam for all the work that she has done over the years. So on this new 9600, I didn't share comments before, but I just have a couple of places where I think we need to add students or students and employees, and I'll share that with the policy committee.
And I'll note on that one too, one of the reasons why we don't is because employees have an employee handbook or negotiated agreements, and students have the student code of conduct in their own handbook. So we also didn't want to overlap where those things are already being addressed.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments at this time? Excellent. Well, thank you very much. We're going to just move right along then to our workshop topic, the ever so exciting budgets. And to that, we turn to Mr. McMichael.
Thank you. I'll point out that we anticipated a large crowd because this is the presentation of the year, but sometimes I get disappointed with that. But nevertheless, let me begin by noting that we have several funds, but generally when we're talking about the budget, oftentimes people are really talking about one of our funds, starting with the education fund, but we actually have 5 that are tax supported, and which is 2 more than most school districts have, because we also have 2 referendums, as you know, an operating referendum, and we were the first district in the state to have a safety referendum, which we're proud of both of those and proud that our community would support those. So those are the 5 funds, are the education fund, the operating referendum, the school safety referendum, and the operations fund, and the debt service fund. Our operation for tax-supported funds is just over $200 million, so this 7 or 8 slide PowerPoint won't get into all the details, but hopefully it'll give an overview. We will provide this PowerPoint to you at the end of the meeting, as well as the backup detail that goes with this. So again, first, our largest fund is the education fund. That's our primary fund for student instruction and learning, salaries and benefits for instructional staff, even more so now than in the previous general fund, because a number of things that were in the general fund that were not directly in the classroom were taken out, and in our case, moved to the primarily to the operating referendum fund. So the operating referendum fund, then, as you can see, is $24 million. So that clearly has a major positive impact that our community was willing to support that, to provide that $24 million more funds for teaching and learning. The third fund is our operations fund. This replaces what we used to have, a separate transportation fund, a bus replacement fund, and a capital projects fund. And so it incorporates all of those expenses for those 3 major categories, and then including things like maintenance and technology. Not all of our technology comes from here, but a significant portion does, particularly the the staffing for our technology. And then the fourth fund is our debt service fund, and as the name implies, that fund is used primarily to retire debt. And then our last fund and most recent fund is the school safety referendum, and that's what's allowing us financially to provide for resource officers in all of our schools, various mental health programs for students, as well as various professional development related to that whole topic. And so again, in total, just over almost $205 million. So I'll start with the education fund and the referendum fund. As the board knows, I combine these funds because essentially we can use them for, particularly the referendum fund, for the same purpose. And so for 2022, the revenue that we've projected for these funds is just over $140 million. And that's primarily the basic grant from the state. And the grant is based on enrollment. And I want to emphasize here that this year, it's based on a decrease of about 155 students. And that's significant, not what was projected. We projected over 300 students more than that. You'll remember we had an updated demographic study by our demographer, partially because of redistricting. And so we had the latest, best information we could have. And but nevertheless, we still don't have the final count date until Wednesday, but it'll be right at 155 students less, and with a little over about $6,100 per student, that's a decline in revenue of approaching $2 million. So that's a challenge. We will manage that challenge, but I wanted to emphasize it here this evening. Particularly because the board approved salary increases for 2 years for all of our staff except teachers, because as you know, we go through a collective bargaining process, which we're in the midst of with our teachers. And so on expenses, I will address in part how we're responding to the decline in students rather than the increase in students. I'll note the second year, because our budgets are on a calendar year basis, but our funding from the state's on a fiscal year basis. So the 2022 budget from the state's perspective, is a combination of 6 months of one fiscal year funding, and then, which is on a school year basis more or less, and then 6 months of the second year. And so we combine those. And then again, the operating referendum levy, as you can see here, we're assuming increases 4.3%, and that'll be a pretty accurate number because it's set by the state. Now on expenditures, you'll see we're projecting $139 million of expenditures, which is less than the first year, or less than the revenue. And the reason, and we're also noting that salary increases in 21-22 are 4.5% plus increment. And I want to emphasize, because we are in the midst of collective bargaining, this isn't any assumption that we've predetermined what the outcome is going to be. So, as I always do, I present numbers based on what I know, which is the current salary schedule. That schedule can change, but based on that, these are the percentages that drive the assumed increase in cost. So it's not any attempt on our part to predetermine the outcome of bargaining. It's just projecting cost based on information we know, and the information we don't know is the outcome of bargaining. And the second year is what I want to emphasize, because we're now, this budget is showing a 3% salary increase in the second year. And that 3% is for certified staff, which would be administrators, department chairs, and teachers. But in the case of department chairs and administrators, the boards had approved a 4.5% raise in the second year. And so we're going to come back at the next meeting, and we've shared this with our administrators, but we're going to recommend that you amend that second year to 3%. And really what that's reflecting in part is an offset due to the loss of enrollment. The other part is when we do have a loss of enrollment, we do need less staff. And so the total cost of personnel, of course, is the amount of salary that we pay and then how many people we pay. So it's a combination of those two that we're working with, so that over this biennium, you'll see here in a minute that we will have and will continue to maintain a balanced budget. So then on the other two major categories of benefits, we had a 7% increase in health insurance this year. That's as high as we've had since 2011, I think, and or 2012 perhaps. But nevertheless, it's set at 7% this year, and then we are projecting and assuming 5% next year. And you can see that the non-personnel expenses, which is everything from Ascension contracted nurses that we have to transfer tuition, or some of the kind of non-controllable in terms of salaries, and then our supply budgets and travel and so forth, we set at 2% increase. Yes.
So we're projecting an increase of only 5% in 22, 23.
Yes.
And I don't know how to say challenge you. I personally feel like with the COVID-related healthcare expenses across the nation, it is
Yep.
naturally going to cause all of our
Yes.
insurance premiums to skyrocket at some point, which is unfortunate, but
Yes.
somebody's got to have to pay for it. And,
Right.
So I would love for it to be 5, but I want us to be prepared should it be more.
And we are, and let me explain how we are. One is this 7% in part reflects what you just said, and that we have seen some increased costs, during this past year. As I mentioned earlier, our health insurance, it's in the context that our package for insurance is about $20 million. So a part of when you're self-funded, there's legal requirements that you maintain a certain amount of cash, because you have, by the state's definition, you have to be fully funded. And so in a self-funded plan, there are two numbers that are really important. One is the projection of claims, and the other one is the maximum claim, because even though we're self-funded, we don't have unlimited liability. When claims reach a maximum, which they never have in my career, but it's it's possible. If they reach a maximum, we buy what's called reinsurance, and then we are insured beyond that maximum. So we know worst case scenario, this is the amount that we would have to pay if everything was worst case possible. I don't know anybody that's ever found that to be the case, but you have to have a ceiling that you assume. And so we do, and we have enough funds to cover if we did hit the maximum, and that's required by law, and it's certainly a good business practice aside from that. So if our 5%, if we basically estimate under, then what happens, all things equal, is that would eat into that cash, and then the next year we start all over again, and we look at how much cash we have, what's the expected claims, what's the maximum claims, and then what does the premium need to be set that year to cover that liability. So if you have that so-called bad year, which is kind of what you're describing, depending on how bad it is, it's going to get reflected the next year in the premiums, which is, we try to avoid that because we're currently, for some time now, we've been in double-digit inflation, medical inflation, and Carmel is not typical, and so at that 5 or even 7% is closer to half the trend, rather than, so we're way below what the trend is, and we attribute part of that to our wellness operations and our culture of well-being, and we know that that's helping manage that, and but it's certainly not an exact science, and as is the projection on enrollment. So there's some calculated risk associated with when you have 2-year agreements. And when you give, 2 years of increases, but we don't do that. We're informed about that, and we make what I believe to be, responsible recommendations and decisions in the context of that overall picture. You're welcome. And I'll note here that the graphic shows that you can see most of our money is spent in salary and benefits, which is, when you think about it, perfectly appropriate and to be expected since we're in the people business. So you see this is a slide on our cash balance, and you can see the chart and see that we've maintained a pretty stable balance, although in the last couple of years, we declined a bit, and then we anticipate coming back up by the end of 2022 as well. So we're at $8.9 million at the beginning of January of 21. That'll project that will go down a bit by the end of 21, and then you can see if you go to the bottom that we'll be back up to about the same as we started this year with. Now, the rest of the story is I would like that to go up, not be the same, because as we increase our budget, then you've heard us talk a lot about a minimum of 8% balance. One, this isn't 8%, and as you can see from the slide for 21, although it's close, but we want to, and that is a minimum. So we want a minimum in this fund. So the dollars have to go up a little bit as the budget gets bigger. Just the math of it, and then as you know, we want to have additional cash in our rainy day fund so that we have a total of about 12 or 13%. And times like this, times like COVID, those are two good examples why we need a certain savings account or cash balance, as we call it, so that because we can't totally predict the future, and there are rainy days that happen and unanticipated expenses. Okay, our second fund, or third fund actually, is the operations fund. You can see it's just a little over $30 million. It's primarily, as you see from the chart, coming from property tax, with the exception of the education fund. All these funds are primarily property tax, and so it's certainly the majority from property tax, and then we also receive it receives a portion of excise tax and financial institution tax. With regard to expenditures, this fund has salaries and benefits in it, like the other funds, everything from technology staff to transportation employees and so forth. So you'll see the same percentages there. Same thing with benefits. And then you see in non-personnel, we have such things as utilities and property insurance, and as well as a big one would be non-personnel would be buses. Because this, as I said earlier, incorporates what used to be a specific bus replacement fund. And so our costs are projected at $31 million. And you'll see from this slide that in this fund, we have a planned decrease in cash balance because this is the fund that we have and will continue to, for a while, to transfer some funds from here to the rainy day fund. And we had talked about that before. One of the financial positives, that's the only positive I can think of being short on bus drivers is we were spending less money because we would hire more bus drivers if we could find them. And so now in 21 and 22, we will be spending more on the same drivers that we have because we've increased their salary and they're running double routes and of course we're paying them to do that additional work. But also as that hopefully changes and we're able to hire more drivers, then we'll need fewer double routes. So the money will kind of shift from the existing employee doing the additional work to hopefully additional drivers so that we have a more, what we've come to understand as a more typical routing system. Then our within the operations fund, or a part of this, there are two plans. One is referred to as a capital projects plan, which includes larger planned expenditures. And then there's a bus replacement plan, which, as the name implies, anticipates purchase of buses, and it's a 5-year plan, so it looks out not only the current year, but the next 4 years after that. And then I think finally on our debt service fund, and really pleased with this fund and the way it's a very considered management of our debt. And of course, this is the fund that primarily gives us the funds needed to maintain our facilities and the community's facilities. And we're able to do that, as you can see, that with the exception of the longest one there, the Series 2020, that's the 2 elementary schools. And so they'll be paid off in 14 years, which is a short time for a 70, almost $80 million bond issue. But somewhat of a long time for Carmel Schools in terms of, as you see the other series of bonds, they'll all be paid off within 8 years, except for that one. And you can see some paid off in 3 years, 2 years, and 4 or 5 years at the most. So that's also what allows us, when we sell the next bond, we'll have other bonds paying off, so that's a part of managing our tax rate, so that it's fair, really, in the community. Because when you're spending a constant amount of money for something like facilities, it just means that taxpayers over a long period of time, it's not the same people, of course. And so as people come in and out of the system of paying taxes, they're kind of paying their fair share to provide for the public schools. And if this line was up and down like this, then you either aren't paying your fair share, or you're paying yours and everybody else's because everything's been delayed. And so we think this is the best way to manage that. You'll see here that we started a cash balance of $8 million, and you can see if you go to the bottom that it's dropping, and that's by design. There's 2 reasons for that. Well, 2 reasons for that, really. One is that older bonds, districts were permitted to have maintain a cash balance of 50% of the payments for the year. We pay bonds twice a year, and the idea was if you could have enough cash that if something happened with your current cash flow, you'd be able to make that payment, that first payment in January. And that wasn't the state legislature just being nice to schools. In Indiana, the state of Indiana backs the local schools' debt. So if something happened and the school district went bankrupt, the bondholders know that the state will then pay the payment. And the state, of course, doesn't want to pay the payment. so there's a structure that gives the school board some latitude in the event of the worst possible case scenario. However, that's been changed, and so now the 50% is 15%. And so our oldest bond still has the 50%, but the newer bonds now will be 15%. So just by that change, the balance will not, over time, the balance won't be as large as it has been in the past. There was a time where we enjoyed this balance because we generated about $1.5 million of interest earnings, which we proceeded to put in our operating fund to help pay for staff. And now it's less than $100,000. So it's a reflection of the economy, and has been that way for a number of years now. This second reason this is declining is by design on our part, because as you remember from the previous slide, we're going to have a number of bond issues being paid off, and particularly what was a very large bond that did construction of new buildings and renovation in early 2000s. And so we don't want, and of course when the bond's paid off, you can't have the cash balance. So we don't want to go along with millions of dollars of cash and then pay off debt, and then what would happen is the tax rate would drop considerably. because we don't need additional money. We'd have all this cash. And we don't, again, we want a level tax rate. So we're anticipating that and kind of allowing the cash balance to gradually go down. Again, it's in the mix of how much money we need to pay the debt for the year. And so we've anticipated this and calculated it in when we set the debt payments for the recent bonds that we have sold. The anticipation is that part of that, first year or second year payment is from cash rather than a new money coming in from the tax rate. And so it's just all part of that financial planning. And then the levies, in summary, and the tax rates that it takes to raise this much money are shown here, and you can see them individually, and also see at the bottom that we continue to maintain a very level tax rate. Our projection for 22 is a half cent more than 21. Feasible that won't be exact the tax rate, because the other part of the equation in terms of is the rate, but also the assessed value. So in debt service, for example, if we had a higher assessed value than we're assuming, then that would have the potential to raise the same money but lower the tax rate. So in the context of a half cent on 85 cents, we think this will be very close, but it may not be completely exact, but we certainly won't be meaningfully raising the tax rate. Okay, so finally, this presentation is just the first step in a rather long process. You can see here it kind of goes on until January 1st. And in terms of the board's involvement in action, this is for presentation only, so the next thing we'll do is we'll advertise for a public hearing to give opportunity for the public to comment on our budgets, and still no action. And then and that would be on the 27th of September, which is a regular board meeting. And then October the 25th, which is a month later for the next regular board meeting, we'll ask the board to approve our budgets, and then we turn it over to the state, basically, because in addition to your approval, it also has to have state approval. And when it says here via Gateway is the online system that's now used for a lot of things, including submission of budgets to the state for their consideration, and they will do that in November and December, and then eventually they will certify, which means they've approved essentially our budgets for the next 12 months, the calendar 2022. So with that, I'll respond to questions if you have them, and realize you haven't had this information, and so you may have questions that follow later, but you've got more than a month before, well, actually until almost 2 months before you actually act on this budget.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you. I do have some questions, but I'm going to, does anybody have any questions at this point? Katie.
Can you talk to us a little bit about our bond ratings?
I'm sorry?
Our bond ratings?
Yes, we have. There's not a school district in the state that has a higher rating than Carmel, and only about maybe 2 or 3 have equal rate as Carmel. You've heard me make comments before that as good as our rate is, we'd always like it to be better, because when you're dealing with the millions and millions of dollars that we are, any little tick on a interest rate would result in lots of money of less interest earnings, and so we always try to do the best we can there. And one area is we generally get a comment that Standard & Poor's, who's a rating agency, would like to see our cash balance higher than 8%. And so we're responding in that partially because of their desire to see that. And we certainly don't think that's a bad idea or anything. And so that's one example where when we get our balance up to 12 or 13%, they'll like that a lot better. And you should know that we've always been very conservative on our cash balance. There's a point where I would feel that to because the money's coming from taxpayers. And so if we have maybe more than we need, we're really taxing more than we need. And so I've always been very sensitive about being financially responsible, but not having excess. And in this community, it'd be easy to have excess because, quite frankly, if when one penny raises $1 million, and we're very fortunate to have the credibility that we have. But I doubt that it doesn't concern me that our taxpayers would be opposed to it. I just don't think it's the right thing to do. And not that I would take for granted that they wouldn't be opposed to it. So we have a very enviable tax rate, and that's results in very low interest rates. And people, the folks that help us with this, our financial advisors, would tell you that the bond community really likes Carmel bonds. Thus, the low interest rate.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you, Roger, and your team for all your effort on this. We know this isn't an easy thing, and we appreciate the expertise that you have and provided for all these years. I think it's important to emphasize what you said already, that our goal is to have consistent tax rates over the long term for a whole number of reasons. One is to keep our high-quality facilities. And I know that you share that bonds are going to roll off, and we know that new bonds are going to come on as we have new projects to keep our facilities great. So I think that's important to share, and I appreciate the words you've already said about that. The one question I have, and I know we will not know the tax rate until the end of the whole process, and I know we've been fortunate that the tax cap hasn't hit us as bad as it has in other districts.
Right.
And I know a lot of that is out of our control because what other taxing bodies do in Carmel will greatly affect that. And I'm thankful for the other taxing bodies to show restraint like we show restraint.
Yes.
But I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that.
Well, I have the same thoughts. I would make the similar comments that you made, and that is that, one, the circuit breaker, which is what you're referring to, that caps the maximum taxes that can be paid. You can have whatever rate you want, you just won't get all the money. And so in the end, taxpayers are guaranteed that a maximum that they will pay, whether they're residential or a business or whatever, except if they approve and vote on a referendum. Those referendums are outside the tax cap, and because essentially people saying it's okay to tax me more, but they have to agree to it. And they generally in this country you don't get that opportunity. You can vote, but you feel like you don't have a lot of say in terms of taxes. But in this case you do, and so we are impacted by the circuit breaker, but not nearly what some of our neighbors and other school districts are. And it's primarily because we have a very high assessed value, and so if the cap is 1% of your assessed value, ours is a lot higher than most other school districts, and so therefore it raises a lot more money. And you hear a lot about us being minimally funded at the state level, but when it comes to local property tax and those 4 or 5 funds that are funded with property tax, we have frankly a real advantage, because so many, as you know, so many of our needs, whether it be facilities or technology, are very tied to how many students we have. And so take computers, for example. If we're providing a device for every student, we can do that with a much lower tax rate than most other school districts. And so that's really helpful for us. And when it came to the tax caps then, because we have a very enviable low tax rate in the school district as well as the community as a whole, and as you alluded to, it's not just us, it's also the city and other taxing units that together we have in this community we have a very enviable tax rate, and so that helps us a lot. It minimizes the negative impact for us of the circuit breaker. That's referred to as a tax credit when it's sent out to taxpayers. It's a loss when it comes to governmental entities, and so who are charged with continuing to provide the same service with less money. So it's as you know, it's a rather big issue that came up several years ago. Oh, I would be remiss, by the way, when you mentioned that I don't do this alone. So I want to particularly acknowledge Kara Colrose, our Director of Finance, who works very closely with me, and we work together to put this information together.
My couple questions. First, will this PowerPoint be available on our website?
Yes,
Okay. And we shall anticipate in the next couple days it will be there?
I would say yes.
Okay.
We provide, I believe, the full information, the same information that you'll receive, not the PowerPoint, as well as some of the backup detail that I believe it's further explained. If not, if it's not there, then it's referenced and it's on Gateway, where people can see all of that either directly on our website or by going to the Gateway website.
Okay, will we be advertising for the public hearing on the budget?
Yes, we'll do that on the tomorrow, actually, and that'll start the process, and then we'll have the hearing on the budget on the 27th.
And where will we be publishing that we're going to be having a hearing?
It's published through the Gateway system.
Through Gateway, so
Yes.
we are not required to post anything in the newspaper or anything like that any longer?
You know, if we are, we publish it in the Noblesville paper. But I believe they changed that now. I don't actually remember offhand whether we definitely put it in Gateway.
Okay.
But we very well may, because it's a hearing, we will publish the hearing. Not all the detail that's in Gateway, but the hearing will essentially say that it's a notice of a hearing for this purpose.
Right. I just want to make sure, because I did not see it on here, that we would like physically be publishing it in a
Right.
paper, and I thought, well, for other hearings, we are
We
required
publish
by
it.
law to
Right.
publish it, and I just want to make sure we aren't missing something that we're required to do.
No, we're not.
Okay. Third, and correct me because I'm pretty sure I'm incorrect on this, but there's we have to spend, as we transfer money from the education fund to the operation fund, it could be no more than 15%. Is that correct? You know what I'm talking about?
I know what you're talking about.
And what is that?
but
And
what
are
you-
we doing that?
Yeah, the answer is, it's not the operations fund that you're referring to. It's it's the operations fund. It is not the operating referendum fund.
Correct.
And so, and you're encouraged, I guess I would use the term, to not transfer, more than like the 15% or whatever. And the whole emphasis from the state legislature's part is of course, the message is we want you to spend, as much money as possible on education and not on, on other things. And in the classroom, closer to the classroom, the better. So things like administration, custodial salaries, minimize that is the message. And so the first year, you may recall that when this first came out, we went through that transfer process, and we looked very good compared to other school districts. That wasn't an issue. But the process was very cumbersome administratively. And so the second year, and since then, what we did was we recognized that because we have a local operating referendum, that previously was used for the same reasons, could be used for the same reasons as the general fund, which previously had those kind of non-classroom expenses in it. And so starting with the second year, rather than doing all this transfer to that fund, we moved those expenses over, because when we transferred, if we transferred $1, we took $1 of state support, and it followed the expense, had to, because you couldn't just move the expense without having money to pay for it. So rather than do that, we moved those expenses that are not allowable in the education fund to the operating referendum fund. And so it accomplishes the same thing. And from the state's perspective, it's a non-issue because we look really good, but not to mislead anybody, but we look really good because we're not transferring any of the money out. We're transferring it over, and we're fortunate again since we're one of about 50 or 55 school districts that has an operating referendum fund. it enables us to do that, and we just kind of, it really made it a lot better from an administrative standpoint. I don't mean the work that the administrator's doing, but you run risk of making mistakes, and it's just messy trying to transfer it over.
So most, and I don't know if we can qualify the percentage, but most of the state funding we are receiving is focused in the classroom, is where I'm.
All of it is.
All of it is.
And, yeah,
Fantastic.
because we don't transfer any of it.
Okay.
And so that would be the epitome of what they would like to see. But again, I'd emphasize if you didn't understand all this, it would be misleading because, we still have those expenses, but we don't have to move money out of the education fund to cover them. What happened is they changed, the funds, and they changed some of the requirements that I'm describing, but they didn't change the flow of the money in the sense that, we get essentially it's a similar look to the basic grant, but then they changed the rules of, changed the funds and therefore changed the rules of what could be paid from the education fund, which didn't include some of the expenses that were previously the general fund. So they made one change and didn't make the other. And the solution was, from their perspective, was you can transfer, but we don't want you to. Or we want you to transfer the expense or somehow make it go away, but we want to keep the money. And financially, that just doesn't work very good.
I think I want to emphasize the point that you said is that we are thankful to our taxpayers for the referendums. And I think your numbers were 50 or 60 out of about 300 districts are similarly situated.
Yes.
And emphasize back to your point, while we may be, quote unquote, one of the lower funded districts from the state, I'm going to mess up the word, from the general funds that they give us, right. We're able to make that up by the two referendums.
Well, there's two things. One is in some ways we're making it up, but the first reason that we have less funding is because we have less poverty, and there's difference of opinion about how much money you need, certainly, but most, maybe all educators I've ever talked to would agree that a child that's at risk also costs, generally more money to educate. And the question is how much, and so that's part of it in terms of the lower funding. But you're also correct that we're receiving $24 million on our first referendum, the operating referendum, and now more recently we're receiving about $5 million for the safety referendum. So you take out almost $30 million of the operation of the school district, and it won't look like it does now. And we say it all the time, but it's, if you're not involved in all this, it just kind of, you say it and people just move on. But Carmel schools would not look like it does now if we had to make reductions in expenditures of almost $30 million.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate those comments, and I agree with exactly what you said. I guess I'm speaking for myself, recognize that it does cost more for other different kinds of students, and that we're fortunate, one, in the community that we live in, and I think it's important to emphasize again our assessed value. When we go back and look at if another school district has a referendum, for them to raise the same amount of money, they have to have a much higher percentage of the tax rate to do that. So that you alluded to earlier is, what makes us very fortunate in terms of funding for our students.
However, we'd still like more from the state budget.
We would.
Follow-up question, just because you mentioned it. Can you confirm the reason why it's the Hamilton County Reporter as far as like pushing public, is that because of the publishing frequency?
No, it's first because media has to meet certain requirements in order to be qualified from the state as an acceptable publication, and it's rather complicated as to the definition of all that, but that's the first reason, and
okay.
that's where we advertise it.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Okay, we will see this several more times. So if you do have some, just send them on to Roger, and he will bring them up or ask at the next meeting. Thank you very much, Roger.
Thank you.
Next, we have reports, and to that, we turn to Dr. Beresford.
Thank you. I want to add my congratulations to Mr. McMichael and his team as well. And he's interrelated with every department in the district because, everything requires funding. And I also just want to point out that we don't take that for granted, that we have a lot of good factors here in Carmel Clay Schools, but it is masterful the way the funds have been managed by this team. It's unheard of to do the millions of dollars of facility improvements that we do in a large district and keep the tax rate exactly the same, and to pay those things off in 8 years, where most districts are taking out 30-year loans, and you can imagine the savings and interest from that. And then the other pieces of that is that the money's managed in a way that looks at the long game. And a lot of districts won't fix things or do things until something breaks, where there's been a tradition of a plan here that we look at our facilities at midlife and take actions at those point in time, which is really a progressive maintenance plan, which a lot of, there's been a lot of research and articles about what an advantage of that and how it saves you so much money in the long run. So just a real nice job in all that. For my committee, or excuse me, my superintendent's report, is first off, as a matter of record, I am appointing Mr. Mike Kirshner as the new policy committee member, and he'll be filling the vacancy created by Pam Nowell's retirement from the board. So thank you, Mike, for stepping up to fill that role. And I also want to thank Pam for her service on that committee, and Katie, our vice president, Katie Browning, and Dr. Dudley for their commitment and continued work in reviewing and revising our board policies. I wanted to take note that Saturday marked the 20th anniversary of the September 11th terrorist attacks. And, I don't know where you all were at that time, but I remember specifically where I was sitting at the moment that plane hit the tower, and working as an assistant principal in a junior high school, and the plane that we had to take right away as we were trying to figure out what was happening. We had a family in our school at that time, a student in our school whose brother was assigned to the Pentagon, which was hit. And I remember being with that family and trying to get a hold of their older son, and they couldn't get a hold of him. They came to the school, and they were able to get a hold of him in our building when that happened. And it's been a difficult journey for those who lost loved ones in that initial attack and in the war that followed. And other folks lost jobs, lost businesses. They experienced hardships in other ways. I was watching NFL football on Sunday, and the daughter of a victim of the Twin Towers sang the national anthem, and they broadcast that to all the games. And so this isn't something that just happened and it's ancient history now. There's still people that are experiencing those hardships still. 9/11 at that time caused many of us to do a lot of soul searching. It changed priorities. I think it caused us to focus more on our families, our friends, and helping our neighbors. At that time, we saw people applying for jobs as teachers and police officers and firefighters. A lot of emergency responders had an increase in people wanting to do those jobs. As a nation, we became more committed to helping others and making a positive difference in a world that can sometimes be very cruel. It was one small group of individuals who created this tragic day in our nation's history. And that's important to remember, because we as individuals choose how we will impact the world around us. I hope that by remembering the tragedy of 9/11 that we choose to be a people that's committed to bringing more respect and compassion into the world. That we can be a group of people who pull together and not divide. A group of people that spread love, not hate. And be good, kind people who make a positive difference. And I think maybe that's the best way that we can honor the victims of September 11th, 2001. And I just wanted to make sure that we acknowledge that had happened. No, it's a pretty intense topic, and I hate to do another one in a row, but September is National Suicide Prevention Month, and we are here in Carmel Clay Schools are fortunate to have many resources to assist individuals, students, and families who may be struggling with mental health issues. And I just encourage anyone to please reach out to our building administrators, our school counselors, or social workers if you need support or help of any kind. We're fortunate to have Stephanie Whiteside, who serves as our mental health coordinator for our district, and she can assist in connecting students and families with whatever help they need. I think that over the years, recent years, we have made some great strides by working together to end the stigma that's associated with mental health. I really feel like we've made some good gains there. And always I want folks to know that it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to reach out and get the help that you need when you need it. Also, September 15th through October 15th is the month-long celebration of Hispanic Latinx Heritage Month. And so Carmel Clay Schools is hosting the Heritage Month Art Contest for all students to participate in. And then this is the fun one. Be sure to check out the Latinx Dance Night. And that's open to the public, and it's going to be on September 30th. Doesn't that sound like a lot of fun? And there's going to be, an instructor to teach folks some dance moves there, I guess. And so the details will be on our website for those events and contests. Another plug, the fall season is upon us. You know what that means. It's time to register for the annual Ghost and Goblins Run Walk by the Carmel Education Foundation. You don't want to miss the race kickoff with our Teacher of the Year, Leslie Karpiak, is going to be there. And then all proceeds from that race go to our friends at the Carmel Education Foundation. And for more information, you can visit ghostandgoblinsrun.com. More fun coming along is next week is homecoming at the high school and across the district. So there'll be a lot of spirit days leading up to the main event that weekend, and we encourage all students to join in the celebration, and let's go Hounds, homecoming. This Sunday, September 19th, a tribute to Orchard Park Elementary School will be held at Orchard Park from 2 to 4 p.m. So community members will be able to walk the halls and share memories of the school. As you recall, we decided to change the tribute to this September because we figured by then all the COVID restrictions would be done. We could have a better celebration. And so little did we know it would still be around. But we do want to encourage everyone to stop by and celebrate the great history of Orchard Park and the Cubby Nation and what a rich history that school has. I wanted to thank the school board, congratulate the school board on earning the 2020 Exemplary Governance Award. You have now gotten 2 in a row there, as you can see, so congratulations, board. And so that concludes I've already done my bell ringer for Pam, so that concludes my report, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Dr. Beresford. Does anybody have any questions for Dr. B at this time? Well, seeing that there are no further questions and we've made it through the agenda, may I get a motion on the table to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Thank you with your whisper. May I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Louise. Discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.